Hi everyone, thanks for coming to this PD about sexuality education. We think it's valuable that we make sexuality education a focus throughout the school year and therefore have created this short PD on how we aim to approach sexuality education. As we are not qualified to teach you about certain topics, we have a professional from Family Planning Victoria to come in next week and run a workshop with you so everyone has the same information. Okay, so let's begin the PD.
What is sexuality education and why is it relevant? Sexuality education informs students on issues relating to human sexuality, which may include sexual activity, reproduction, safe sex, birth control, and sexually transmitted diseases. This may be considered quite an uncomfortable topic for both teachers and students. However, it is highly important that students are well educated and aware of the different aspects and potential consequences when involved in sexual activity. Becoming sexually active is a natural part of life that will eventually happen at some point in a student's life. Therefore, educating them for either present or future encounters in sexual activity is crucial to ensure a student understands the nature of what can occur. The Better Health Channel states that fewer women are becoming pregnant due to the availability of effective contraception and sexual education being taught more often rather than a drop in sexual activity itself. It is important for students to understand that sexuality is also about better understanding of yourself and others and being able to feel confident within your own skin, whether that be through gender diversity, identity, and relationships. All aspects of sexuality education are important in the development of children and therefore are relevant in a sexuality education curriculum. Here's a quick video.
Can make this journey easier, more certain. In today's changing world, growing up isn't always easy. Imagine being without accurate information and reliable skills as you navigate the journey to adulthood. Do myths end up masquerading as reality? Do peers, television and the internet stand in for reliable resources and information from caring qualified adults? Fortunately, comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE, can make this journey easier, more certain and healthier for many young people around the world. You may know CSE as life skills education, family life education, or HIV prevention education. No matter what the name, CSE aims to ensure that all young people develop the knowledge and skills to make conscious, healthy and responsible choices about relationships and sexuality. CSE has always been a part of many cultures. Often family members taught young people about puberty, sex and relationships. Now, as societies change, the responsibility is increasingly shared with health workers, teachers and schools. CSE in schools is led by trained teachers and professionals. It focuses on the development of practical skills and knowledge that is scientifically accurate and comprehensive. CSE starts in primary school with age-appropriate content and builds on topics gradually as the child grows older and develops. It looks at human development throughout every phase of life, including physical, psychological, social, and spiritual dimensions. CSE gives young people a chance to think critically about gender and about their role in their culture and society. It teaches about tolerance, non-violence, respect, equality, and empathy. CSE shapes values, attitudes, and decisions about relationships, including healthy sexual relationships when the time comes. With this knowledge and these life skills, it's easier for young people to decide if, when, and with whom to have sex, and how to say no if that's not what they want. It's a fact. All the evidence shows that good quality CSE helps young people to delay their first sexual experience. It also helps prevent HIV, sexually transmitted infections, and unintended pregnancy. Young people deserve to be healthy, happy, and to realize their fullest potential. They deserve to grow up in a world with CSE, a much less scary, less confusing, and less harmful place than a world without it. As leaders, teachers and parents, we have the responsibility to act now, so comprehensive sexuality education is part of every young person's journey to adulthood, no matter where in the world they live.
We just showed you that video to show the kind of approach we are aiming towards. But first, here are the 4 best approaches most schools use and the positives and negatives of those approaches. Which practice approach might you use?
So we've looked at 4 different practice approaches, including the whole school approach, also known as the inclusive approach, abstinence, workshops, and health and PE teaching. First up, we have the inclusive and whole school approach. According to the Department of Education, a whole school approach is a cohesive, collective, and collaborative action in and by a school community that has been strategically constructed to improve student learning, behaviour, and well-being. How this changes for your typical school setting is it's not only the teacher at the front of the classroom trying to teach our students about sexual education. All teachers should be able to provide all students with all the information. But it is not only the teachers that need to get involved for this approach. All members of the community, including the parents, staff, and even outside sources such as the canteen staff or before and after school carers, get involved and are supported by one another. So to achieve this whole approach, all teachers must be given the same information so that any student can talk to any teacher at any time about any issue and receive similar answers. From the teacher's knowledge, all students should be presented with the knowledge too, so that they know that they can speak to any teacher about their problems if they feel the need to do so, and they can make informed decisions for themselves. To ensure this information is not forgotten, teachers should be aiming to entwine the information within their curriculum so that students can see the real-world applications. This is an ongoing tactic that they can use any point in time and not simply when they are covering sexual education in class. It is critical to have integration between year levels, curriculum, approaches to learning, and across all staff. The second approach we've been looking at was abstinence. Some schools do teach an abstinent-only approach to education. This is not always a bad thing, as abstinence is the only 100% effective way of avoiding pregnancies. Often schools that follow this approach do provide accurate information about how babies are made, but only from a biological viewpoint. Some schools will also teach of sexually transmitted diseases or infections, but unfortunately many of these schools will only again view them from a factual stance, without teaching any strategies of how to deal with these infections or diseases, either in treatment or prevention, save for abstinence. Most schools that teach the abstinence approach are in fact religious, where sex outside of marriage is either shunned or considered sinful. The expectations from these schools is that parents will teach their children about these things when they feel the time is right. Many parents also feel this is the best case, as they do not wish for schools to taint their children. Marley's is an advocate for abstinence and follows the Jewish tradition. His stance is, young people should be educated about these things, but not at the cost of implying that unmarried sex is okay. Schools that follow this approach have some success with delaying sexual acts within the schooling years, but it also shows negative impacts on students' willingness to use contraception, due to them having no knowledge of these strategies.
Workshops. This approach allows students to engage in interactive workshops presented by professionals. These workshops provide the most accurate and relevant information appropriate to the age of children and young adults. This approach isn't as common as others, however, it takes the pressure off teachers who may not feel comfortable teaching the topic and allows students to get effective responses to their queries. These workshops may not occur as frequently as they should, making it difficult to keep information consistent. This approach does not prepare teachers for the slight chance that a student approaches them seeking advice.
The health and PE teacher approach is one of the most common approaches used in schools across Australia, with over 3/4 of Australian students reporting their sexual education having been within a health and wellbeing class. While this approach allows for every student to get similar information from the teachers, the majority of health and wellbeing teachers are females aged between 20 to 39. Some students would feel uncomfortable to disclose information and questions to young female teachers and would instead prefer a male teacher or perhaps an older teacher. Even though students might feel comfortable approaching other teachers with sexuality education questions, these teachers would lack sexuality education training and knowledge, and therefore can give the wrong information. Sexuality education should be presented in a safe learning environment where every student feels that they can ask someone for help or support and get accurate information. The health and PE approach does not allow for this.
So for looking at our best practice approach, we've gone with the whole school approach. First up, we have a TED Talk about why we shouldn't shy away from sexuality education and why it is so important in today's society.
We're failing them at home. It aims to promote self-awareness and equitable social. My second point, there is considerable evidence from around the world that sexuality education does not harm children and adolescents, and it can do a lot of good. One of the main reasons for resistance to sexuality education is the concern that it plants the idea in children's minds to have sex before they are ready to have sex. The corrupting influence of sexuality education. In fact, there is no evidence of this. Studies from around the world, different cultures, points to the fact that sexuality education does not lead to early or increased sexual activity. Studies also show that sexuality education improves knowledge and understanding. It can bring about positive changes in sexual behavior, such as delayed sexual initiation, use of condoms and contraceptives, and in a smaller proportion of cases, it can reduce negative health outcomes such as sexually transmitted infections or unwanted pregnancies. There's also growing evidence that it can build autonomy and confidence in girls and boys and better communication in relationships. But this is data from studies. What about data from countries? There is data. There are a number of Western European countries which have compulsory sexuality education programs in schools. The Netherlands is one of them. There are a number of other Western European countries which don't have such programs. England is one of them. Now, England and the Netherlands more or less are in the same socio-economic level. The age of initiation of sexual activity among girls in England and the Netherlands is more or less the same. But the level of adolescent fertility in England is 3.5 times to 4 times higher than it is in the Netherlands. Convincing evidence that sexuality education provides useful benefits. Let me move to my third point. Children and adolescents need and have a right to sexuality education. Sadly, studies show that their needs are not being met, their rights are not being fulfilled. Studies from around the world show that adolescents are unaware and unprepared for the changes that are occurring in their bodies at the time of puberty. Many girls learn about menstruation on the day their periods start, and they are shocked and scared to see their menstrual blood for the first time. Many boys wake up confused and alarmed when they see their nocturnal emission. It certainly happened to me, and there was no one to talk to. Many adolescents are unaware and unprepared to avoid unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections when they start sexual activity, which is often during adolescence, or to refuse unwanted sex from peers or influential adults. Most of the coerced sexual activity occurs from adults in the family or in close contact with the family. And lastly, adolescents are unaware and unprepared about where to seek help and how to seek help when they need to do so. So what this means is that because we are shying away from sexuality education, the children and adolescents in our lives, our sons, our daughters, our nephews, our nieces, are suffering from health and social problems that they don't need to.
The Department of Education defined a whole school approach as being more than just the implementation of a formal curriculum. This means it is not just something the school is following because the school's board or VCAA suggested that it does, but because it is the best way to allow each and every student to feel comfortable and safe, while providing critical information that will help them long after their schooling years. This is the best approach as it takes the best points from the other approaches without the negative effects. One possible drawback would be that we as teachers must be knowledgeable and put more effort into our lessons and applying it to the curriculum. But as educators, it is our duty of care, our moral obligation to help our students not only with academic studies, but with their journey through adolescence. This means what this approach requires from teachers and the community is that we accept that students are human beings and not simply a tabula rasa that we feed information to. These humans are all different and we will all have urges and we need to cater for them all. We also need to cover all areas of sexual education, including gender identity, the biological facts, and the social implications such as relationships, with strategies to help the students develop. What sets this approach apart from the others is that students will not simply be learning sexual education from your health and PE teachers. For some students, their PE teacher is their worst nightmare and they would not feel comfortable talking to them about their own puberty problems. A girl experiencing menstruation for the first time would not feel comfortable talking to them about to a male health teacher and would be less comfortable confronting this at home with a single dad. However, all students have a teacher that they trust enough to explain their problems to, and if they know that they are knowledgeable about their sexual education, they can turn to them for help. Even if the school's approach is abstinence, it is imperative that students still receive all the information so that they can make informed decisions about their lives. All students have the right to this knowledge and it is a teacher's job to educate. Students need to know how to use contraception, how STIs are contracted and can be prevented, and what the options are if they do fall pregnant. Through using workshops, it's a great idea to get students started on this topic, but it is simply like any other subject taught in schools. If students do not revisit and reuse the knowledge, then they will forget it, which is why working sexual education into the curriculum over multiple learning areas and through the course of the year is so important. Not only do they learn from other teachers who may explain it in new ways for them, but all students reach puberty at different times. The workshop may be beneficial for those going through their changes at that time, but it is only a select few of the cohort. By continuing the education all year, all students have the right to ask questions at any point in the year without feeling embarrassed.
Okay guys, now we've just heard about our whole school approach that we plan on implementing into our school. We're going to talk about what topics that we feel are most important in sexuality education. So we're going to run a bit of an activity and get you talking. So in your table groups, I want you to discuss what topics you think are most important to teach within sexuality education. So have a little bit of a discussion, maybe for about 5 minutes, and then we'll do a bit of sharing. So go. Okay guys, that was a good discussion. Well done, good brainstorming. So it's important that students are given the chance to learn every aspect of sexuality education throughout their whole schooling to give them the best chance to succeed in life, along with fact-based topics such as STIs, reproduction and safe sex practices. It is also important students learn about topics such as gender diversity, identity and pleasure. Having key information on topics such as these can allow for students to better understand each other and themselves. If we do not educate students on topics like diversity, gender and identity, then we could easily be giving students the opportunity to engage in bullying and harassment, something that we want to avoid. Okay guys, we're going to move on about disclosure and different strategies we can use. So it's important that students feel comfortable disclosing information and asking questions, as we have a duty of care as teachers to keep students feeling safe and included. There are 3 different types of disclosure that you as teachers need to keep aware of. Number 1, purposeful disclosure. Purposeful disclosure is when a student approaches you and gives you information directly. Number 2, accidental disclosure. You'll pick up on accidental disclosure through the behaviour of the student, whether that be by something they say or something they do. And lastly, indirect disclosure. Indirect disclosure is when the students tell you little bits of information to see if they can trust you. Usually the information is said to be about a friend rather than themselves. It's important to know what to look out for, as many students are wanting help but just don't know how to ask for it. So we're going to run another activity in your table groups. I'm going to give you a scenario of a child disclosing information, and as a group you need to discuss some strategies on how to approach this. We'll have about 5 minutes to discuss, and then we'll run a brief discussion as a whole group afterwards. So I'll just read out the 5 scenarios. Scenario 1. A female student approaches you and asks for your advice, and she says, "On the weekend I was at a party and everyone was drinking. I decided that I wanted to have sex with this guy at the party, but once I started drinking I changed my mind and forgot all about it. I woke up to him having sex with me. Since it happened, I feel wrong and somewhat dirty. My friend said that it's okay because I wanted to have sex with him originally," which is true, so it's not rape. I'm just confused as to why I feel this way. Scenario 2. A male student asks to speak to you about a uniform matter. The student feels uncomfortable in the boy's uniform and wants to start wearing the girl's dress. He has already asked another teacher and they said no in fear of him being bullied. However, he said he would rather be bullied than feel uncomfortable in his own clothes. So how would you resolve this? Scenario 3. A female student has discovered she is pregnant and has told you she is dropping out because school is too hard to manage. So how could you solve this question? Number 4. You hear around the playground that many students are bullying a male student for having an STI. Even though he's been denying it to the other students, you get the feeling that perhaps he does have an STI but hasn't dealt with it. What should you do? And finally, scenario 5. A female student approaches you with a question and says, "On the weekend, I was having sex with my boyfriend and towards the end, I experienced an odd feeling that I have never felt before, an extreme tingling sensation that felt kind of good. I don't know what it was and I'm too scared to tell my boyfriend in case it's a bad thing. Am I doing something wrong? Is that something that happens to other girls?" Okay, now you've got your scenarios in your groups, just have a bit of discussion. Okay, good discussion, guys, well done. So, there are several things you need to keep in mind when a child discloses information to you or asks you a question. The first being mandatory reporting. As teachers, we have the responsibility of reporting any serious information that comes to light about students and their families. We must also consider bullying. If a child approaches you with a question, such as scenario 2, and bullying seems a part of the issue, then this also needs to be addressed. Lastly, you need to think of your student-teacher relationships and not crossing a line. For instance, if a student approaches you about having a crush on you and not knowing how to handle that, then that is an issue that needs to be passed on to another staff member to avoid a conflict. We must always remember that we are here to support and make each and every student feel safe within a school environment, as we have a duty of care for everyone.
Next up, guys, we're going to be looking at how to incorporate sexuality education into the curriculum. So if you guys wouldn't mind jumping up and switching into your faculty groups, and we're going to have a quick discussion about how you could apply it into your faculties. All right, guys. Yep, some really good points. We're going to be looking at a couple of examples that we suggested as well. So in health already looks at sexual education in the form of puberty. Try expanding on this and discussing STIs, contraception, and not just simply the changes undergone during puberty. Biology also looks at sexual education in how babies are made and the anatomy of genitalia. Once again, this can be expanded on with some possible scenarios about who should be involved with the baby, for example, doctors or midwives, and what happens during pregnancy and the effects of drugs and alcohol on the baby. Also, what happens after childbirth with possible scenarios of postnatal depression and the mental effects of childbirth. In English, there are always units on identity, and during these units you could explore sexuality, other genders, and sexual orientation. Also, the book choices that are studied in VCE could relate to or incorporate sexual education, such as Year of Wonders explored in the VCE text in 2013. In the arts, there are many ways you could explore sexual education, which only requires minimal effort from the teachers. Some art classes do portraits of naked people, which explores the body without sexual desires, though this would perhaps be at a VCE level. Drama is a fantastic class to explore this through by looking at the physical and mental effects of puberty, sex, pregnancy, and even tackling big issues of abuse through some applications such as forum theatre. Music can look at the way the body, love, or sex is depicted through different song formats and through different generations, such as I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles in 1977 against Kia's My Neck, My Back, Lick It in 2002 as an example of part of their song analysis units.
Okay, so the main points for today were to introduce you to our whole school approach, give you the chance to discover ways we can add sexuality education into the curriculum, and briefly give you the chance to create strategies to assist you with disclosure. We hope you now have a fair understanding of these topics and can use them to bring sexuality education into our school's environment. Let's just take a moment to have a brief discussion about today. Does anyone have anything they want to discuss? Okay. We have a handout for everyone with some information and resources on the topics we have just discussed. If anyone has any questions, feel free to discuss them now or approach one of us after the PD. Don't forget, we have Family Planning Victoria coming next week to run a workshop. Other than that, everyone have a great afternoon and we will see you all tomorrow.